God. I'm president of Collinwood for YouTube, Joel Sage, joined by my buddy Butch Rosenbaum, the most wanted man in the West. Don't let him fool you. So we're here to do the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. So, what did you think of this movie, Butch?
Joel, we're gonna have an interesting conversation tonight.
Okay.
I did not like this movie at all.
Really?
I was bored, poopyless. Uh, I feel like this film could have used a really good editor. Cut out about an hour of this film.
No.
Scenes of just people like standing. God. Uh, Here's the thing. So I've been trying. I know you like this film, and I don't want anybody, you especially, but anybody watching it, feel like I'm trying to give you a big old middle finger.
No.
But this is not a western for me. This is a character study set in a western, which I guess technically is a western, because then I've been trying to define, well, what is a western? It has gunplay. It has train robberies, and it's like, well, it kind of ticks, but I think if I had known it was more of a character study and I went with a different mentality.
Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec. I'd like completely missed everything you said. Like you were cutting out there.
Oh no.
Go ahead. Let's see.
Over there. Am I coming in at all?
Okay, say hello.
Hello.
Okay, that was perfect. We'll go from there. We'll see how this goes.
I was just saying how I felt like this wasn't it's definitely not a traditional Western. It's more of a character study.
Yeah.
Gone in with that knowledge. So let me go ahead and say that right away. This is more of a character study than your typical Western.
Yeah.
And I will say Brad Pitt does a really good job. But I'll be honest with you, I avoided this film for a long time simply because of the title.
Yeah.
No, Jesse James is a psychopath. I'm not saying Robert Ford is a hero, but
Right.
uh,
It's like when did you know Jesse James was a psychopath? I knew by the 5th grade, Your Honor.
what's the episode of the Brady Bunch?
Well, here's the thing too. Like now, Frank is the older of the two James Denton brothers, Frank and Jesse. Frank actually, little some historical fact, because we are talking about a historical figure in Jesse James and Robert Ford. Some facts. Okay, Frank James is obviously the older brother of the two, between him and Jesse. Frank joined the Civil War. He joined Cantrell's Raiders. Jesse would join him later. So, fun fact, Frank was actually a wanted criminal by joining Cantrell's Raiders. So he was wanted even before Jesse ever was. Um, while Frank was serving in the Civil War, some Union soldiers came to Jesse's uh, parents' farmhouse and actually beat the crap out of Jesse James so when he was a kid. Now, Jesse actually did murder some people. He murdered a Union bank guard who he mistook for the person who murdered his commanding officer. Also, see, here's my. They also met the Unger brothers in Cantrell's Raiders. That's where they met them. So there's some historical fact for our folks who are going to watch this, because that's the thing too about this movie. I do like this movie. You're right. You are correct, sir, my dear friend. But there is something I don't like about it. It's not a complete movie. It's I more wish they would have did this as a long mini series and told it from the beginning of his life. Um, a bit like, sort of like how we got Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp a bit.
Yeah, that's literally what I was just thinking of. This is Tombstone.
Yep.
And I enjoyed the heck out of Tombstone, but I at the time didn't know a whole lot about the OS. I wanted to know more about what all Wyatt Earp has done. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's that's the thing too. Like the first Western historical Western character I learned about in school was Jesse James. Now I knew about Jesse James from watching the older West, because I watched the one where Henry Fonda plays Frank James. Um, so I did watch movies about Jesse James with my grandfather, and my grandfather made it a point to tell me that these movies, for the most part, the early James movies were probably not historically accurate. And thank God for my late grandfather, because that's the thing. Like, if he knew we were watching like a Western that was about an actual person, he would try to be accurate with, that this is probably not as accurate as it wants to be, but there will probably be a movie one day that will be. And this movie actually is. It's very spot on. I will say that there are points I can't. I think that when you look at the relationship between Frank and Jesse, I describe it as a mob boss and a hitman.
Yeah.
Frank was the boss and Jesse was the hitman. Uh, Jesse was like I said in fifth grade, Jesse James was a cold blooded man. I remember my friend across the room going, Jesse James was a cold blooded bastard, and he got sent to the office. So it's like, I mean, which is true. I mean, Jesse had no problem killing somebody. He was very much a trigger man in every way. And this movie, I think that's one thing this movie displays very, very well. That though it's at the, like you said, I agree with you. It is at the, Butch is right. This movie is set toward the end of Jesse's life, the later years, because when we start this at the train robbery where most of the James gang, the original James gang, the younger brothers, were either murdered or put in prison. And it's funny because the robbery that does that is I believe it's the Virginia bank robbery that Jesse plans. And it's funny because there are many things that make Jesse James a legend. One of them is the shooting of the Union Guard, but it's not done at the Virginia bank. The robbery, the Virginia robbery by the way, that they botch, that Jesse botches and Frank botches. Only Frank and Jesse make it out of there unscathed. Uh, Fun fact. Not so much fun for the other gang members who were caught. But and not too long after that, after this train robbery, they're right. Frank does leave the gang, and I sort of think for two reasons. One, Frank was 10 times smarter than Jesse ever thought about being. Frank saw the writing on the wall. Now, my biggest issue, and this is an issue I brought up in fifth grade to my history teacher. So, Frank James, and I'll ask this to you, who was wanted prior to even Jesse. Frank James, who had, again, I think part of the reason why, though, too, is Frank stayed in the background. Frank didn't personally pull a lot of triggers. Jesse did. But Frank was still wanted by the law. He did do some pretty heinous things. Um, I would dare say that, yes, I'm not disputing Jesse shouldn't have caught a bullet. Yes, Jesse should have caught a bullet and did. But here's the newsflash for people. So should a Frank. And the fact that Frank was basically allowed to retire and not really be pursued by the law at all, I I'm gonna call some bullshit here because I think personally, now I know what history records that Bob Ford. I'm not disputing Bob Ford shot Jesse James. I'm disputing that it was Bob Ford who originally turned on Jesse. I think Frank did long before.
Well, this movie makes a good point, though it is slightly subtle. Jesse is losing his mind if
Yep.
he ever had, and he much like uh, you're right. I mean, Frank was the brains and Jesse was the muscle. But by this time, and especially in this film, with all those silly dime novels, they kind of make him out to be the leader,
Yeah.
and figure make the fellow like, yeah, you go right ahead. Much like a mafia boss. Hey, y'all go kill that people. I didn't have nothing
Yep.
of him. This movie shows that really well. I mean, to me, Jesse has always been a very unlikable character, and this film did nothing to change my viewpoint, and in fact reinforced it. Something I found out doing some research for this: his wife, Zena or Xenia, or whatever her name is, his first cousin.
Yep. I
He,
kn- I learned that in history class that he married his first cousin. I'm like, wait, don't you mean his like third? No, they're like, no, his first. I'm like, oh God.
him and Jerry Lee Lewis, have some questionable taste. This is there. And the more I thought about it, we were supposed to, for anybody who doesn't know, we were supposed to do this video last week, and we weren't able to. And I thought a little bit more about it, and it. One thing about this film is, I won't say that it uh, gave me any sympathy towards him,
Yeah.
but obviously, I think both of them. But this movie is about Jesse. Jesse very much has PTSD.
Yeah.
Read a few things. He was probably borderline socio or psychological, or excuse me, psychopathic or sociopathic. And there's only so much. I was looking back at all the films that they made about him. Like, you've got Audie Murphy. I mean, the one and only literal Captain America playing Jesse James, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't. This Brad Pitt does a really good job.
Yep.
Jesse is losing his mind, and like you read it on Wikipedia or any other place. They're talking about that Bob and his brother stayed with Jesse. This movie is very, very haunting, scary, intimidating. I mean, it kind of reminded me at times, and you can laugh if you want. It kind of reminded me of like House of a Thousand Corpses with Rob Zombie. It was very came across a little serial killer. I can't let you guys get out of my sight.
Yeah. It makes, here's the thing too. It makes all the more when you, because a lot of these gang members that are a part of this new gang weren't a part of the only two who were part of the original gang were Frank and Jesse. So, and even historical context report had, and I read this earlier, that Jesse doubted every single new member's conviction for like he doubted their loyalty toward the South because he Jesse fought in the Civil War and so did Frank. They were part of Crenshaw's Raiders, and for this you sort of have a group who's, I won't say they're as paranoid as him, but they're paranoid of him.
And they have good reason to be.
No, absolutely, yeah. Butch is right. Jesse Jesse's a pure blooded psychopath. I mean, you're right. You hit the nail on the head. He's a killer with a gun. He's a serial killer with a gun. And I like how when Wood is killed, which is his cousin, is related to him, and he comes in, and Dick Little's like, "Is it him? Is it him?" They're like, "Yeah, it's him." Oh shit! Like Jesse James is downstairs, boys. You either go downstairs shooting, or you can go downstairs and just play it cool. And I gotta give Charlie Robert Ford a lot of credit. If that was the case.
Um, this film, for anybody that's not seen it, as we said, it deals with the last part of the James gang. Uh, Frank's not in it very much. I'd say maybe 30 minutes out of almost of a 2 hour film.
Yeah.
And I'm like anybody else. I watch a film. Sometimes I like it. Sometimes I don't. I really miss Roger Ebert because him and when I would listen to Roger Ebert, even if I disagreed and didn't like the film, I would see the things he liked. And there's nobody really in the critic realm that I found that kind of, connection with. So I was trying to read up and I didn't want to go in here and trash this film. And I was like, okay, well, what did they see that I didn't? Our mutual friend Patrick McRae is great for me. Well, think about this, or he'll point, and I'm like, and it'll totally change how I see things. So I've learned to read up. Everybody was talking about the great performance that Casey Affleck gave as Bob Ford, and me, and this is where I guess we're part of the disconnect is. He wasn't necessarily bad, but Bob Ford was not the least bit interesting. He came across as slightly brain damaged. I'm trying to be nice, but he seemed, well, I was looking over here. And I don't know. I think this was intentional. Tell me your opinion. I felt like he had romantic feelings for Jesse on top of hero worship.
Yeah, it's every historical context puts Robert Ford as somebody who idolized Jesse James to the core, who wanted to be like Jesse. So that's something this movie does get right. Romantic, I think Robert Ford is somebody who, at one point in time, thought he wanted to be Jesse James. I do think, I'm not saying he didn't idolize him. I'm not calling out historians here. But I think there's a difference between, oh, I know I want to be that person, or do I really want to be that person? And I think Robert Ford thought at one point in time, well, I want to be like Jesse. But then Robert Ford started hearing things like, well, Jesse's killing members of the gang. Jesse's going to your ranch and beating the shit out of your cousin. And then you start to think, like, well, do I really want to be like this guy? And I think Robert Ford, because it is true. There's a scene in this movie that's again, a lot of this is accurate, where Robert Ford had the dime novels of Jesse, like he did have that. That's true. Now, he was very much, I guess we'd call it how we look at it today, where we have like collections of our favorite actors or something, or of a real life hero or something, whatever you want to say. There would probably be a point in time in Robert Ford's life you couldn't tell him Jesse was a bad man.
Yeah.
But there's also a point, what I got out of this movie most is something I got out of my fifth grade history teacher. By the way, shout out and thank you to Mr. Elias. Not that he'll watch this, but not that he'll see this, but that Robert Ford is somebody who also came to the realization of that Jesse was a very bad man. Now, again, Robert Ford's no saint either, but he's not exactly Jesse James either. He's nowhere near what Jesse was. He's not paranoid. He's not schizophrenic. Do I think he had feelings for Jesse? I think there's one point you could say he does to one degree. And it's when he he gets really sensitive about where Dick Little and Wood are making fun of him about the dime novels. You could sort of see like, and then when his own brother Charlie Ford is teasing him about how he wants how he compares himself to Jesse, and it's right in front of Jesse, and they're at the dinner table, and it's just like you could tell Robert Ford's embarrassed as hell. Um, I do think you're right. There's very little, but I think it is there in this film.
Yeah, in this film, we're not speaking historically,
Right.
and yeah, every all the research I did agrees with what you're saying, that this film attempts to be, as historically accurate as it can be, or pretty darn close. However, like anything, it puts a spin on it. I mean, if I sit here and tell a story from my family, as I tell it in my mind's eye, I'll see my dad or my mom or my sister or cousins or whomever.
Yeah.
Someone listening to the story, be it you, be it someone watching this video, they may take from their family and put an uncle in the place of my dad, and these people look nothing alike, and their motivation's completely different because they weren't there. So yeah, this film, looking at this film, I guess I should have said that in the realm of this film, and yeah, I kind of kept coming back to the old saying, "Never meet your heroes,"
Yeah.
and he was very much Robert Ford's hero. And I kept coming back to that, and straight up, I kept coming back to that episode of the Brady Bunch where Bobby Brady, he wants to grow up and be Jesse James, and I can't remember what happens exactly. There's a point where I think they're on the train, and Jesse James just starts shooting and killing people, and Bobby's like, "No, no, I don't want to do this." And truthfully, I kind of that's what happened to Robert Ford in this film, and historically. Like, when you're a kid, being Batman or being Superman seems cool. When you grow up, you realize, oh, my parents have to die, and or if you're Superman, my whole race has to die, and I have to go somewhere where there's nobody like me, or one or two people like me. But there's a price to these things when you're a kid that you don't see.
Yeah, I think here's the thing too, where there's another moment in this movie where you really want to look at the psych. Again, go look at any historical context later in life. It does put Jesse as a psychopath, and if you really want to, if the train does not convince you, when Brad Pitt, who's playing Jesse James, is talking to Charlie Ford about how he killed a member of the gang, and he says, "You got a story you want to swap with me?" And Charlie Ford's sitting there like, Jesus Christ, look on his face, like, oh my God.
That was after they'd killed Jeremy Renner's character. I can't think of his name.
Wood
His
with him.
Wood. Wood. Yeah. So I felt like at that moment when Jesse said that, he knew or suspected that they had killed Wood. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've kind of I've told an embarrassing story on me. Do you want to join in? And he's like, oh God, no. I mean, because in the Ford's defense, Wood came in shooting, admitted. It's a little bit of an involved story that we're not going to get into at the moment, and it's more self defense than what Jesse did. But yeah, it nobody really comes off good in this film, to be perfectly honest.
No,
Maybe
it's
yeah,
no, you're right. Yeah, see, I deliberately picked a film with a bunch of assholes.
if you ever if you ever go to a website called TV and Movie Tropes,
Yeah.
like one of them is called 20 Minutes with Assholes. And it's usually the first 20 minutes of like a Godzilla movie or Cloverfield or any of those 20 minutes. You're like, who cares about these people? You just can't wait for them to die. And finally, everything's and it's like, God, in honor of Jesse and the Ford telling an embarrassing story, I'm sure you've seen the movie L.A. Confidential.
Yes, yes.
I hated that film. And Patrick, or again, our mutual friend Patrick, he's like, "Why?" I'm like, "There are no heroes. There is no one heroic. It's like major psychopath, medium psychopath, and slightly psychopath. Oh yeah, and there's the guy over here that cares about himself." And he's like, "That's the point." I said, "But Patrick, you can't do that to me." I said, "Is it Guy Pearce that plays the policeman that's on the TV show? He's playing Jack Webb from Dragnet. It's like you can't take. I mean, I grew up watching Dragnet. It's like you cannot take Joe Friday and try to make him a villain and make it okay in my eyes. However, it took him 10 years. He finally got me to where I do agree it's a good film. And kind of like, and I bring all that up. That's a lot like this film. There's
Yeah.
no, there's no, for me anyway. There wasn't anybody to pull for. Wasn't anybody to really identify with. Or just like you said, it's a film with a bunch of assholes.
Well, here's a little fun historical fact too, because again, this movie gets us right too. Dick Dick Little and Wood did get in a shooting scrape over Wood's cousin's fiance, um, which which
But
was
Liddell,
yeah, which
my name was Dick Liddell. I would always make it. It's Liddell.
which which you knew was going to end in bloodshed. I mean, you get that from the historical context too. So the movie gets this one right too. Good job by the film crew for doing the research. I give them a lot of credit. Good job by the writers and producers. I love the way this movie. I'll give you the pros and cons of this movie because I do. You're right. I do like this movie. The cons is again. I've talked about this earlier. It should have been a little more like Wyatt Earp. It should have been more of a mini series. Not that Wyatt Earp was a mini series, but this should have been a mini series. This should have been the beginning, middle, and end of Jesse's life. Because listen, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the story of Robert Ford shooting Jesse. I've heard it way too often. Um, now, this is the most historically accurate one, okay? But with the other con of this movie, I would say is too, even for a movie that's about the end of Jesse's life, it is a bit long. It does drag a bit because you do get lots of shots of open field and I love, but I do. Here's where I think this film really wins you over: is the suspense and the dialogue. Is what I love about this movie because even it's like it shows you what happens when who there are people who worship Jesse and there are people who fear Jesse, and there's two different sides of that coin, and this movie shows that beautifully, and it really shows just how psychotic Jesse James really. I think it's the most accurately portrayal Jesse James. I'll say that.
I agree. It probably is. One of the things I remember now, as you know, and probably anybody else that's seen any of these Western movies we've talked about, I wasn't big into Western growing up. And I remember someone in my elementary kind of talking about Jesse James like Robin Hood. And that is and was a very popular opinion of him. But all the historians, people that researched it, are like, there's no evidence of that.
No, there's not.
All people he gave money to was his gang.
Yeah. Here's somebody who I'll say this. I'll make this bold claim here because I think it's fair to make. Had Jesse not effed up and planned the Virginia bank robbery, and they had not did that robbery, I think you would have seen the James game last a lot longer because the Youngers would have still been around. They would not have went to prison. But that didn't happen. So, and I'll say this too with this movie as well because it does. There's a lot. There's a voice narrator in this movie, which they do a really great job too. telling you the historical context. Again, I do. Again, here's where, because there's a lot of historical fact in this movie, but here's where my opinion differs. And I want to stress this: what I'm about to say is my opinion, not historical fact. My opinion. Um, Again, I think Frank betrayed Jesse before Robert did, because how else does? Because let's put one historical fact in here with this: Frank James was pardoned of his crimes after his brother was assassinated. Now, I'm not trying to be anyone's judge, jury. You know what? Fuck it. Yes, I am. Frank James deserved a bullet too. Okay? Frank James deserved a bullet as much as Jesse. And anybody who wants to dispute that shit, call me. Go ahead.
Do you think after that botched robbery, do you think that's why Frank left?
He did one more robbery with Jesse, and then he leaves after the. But yeah, I
Or
think
big
I
influence in leaving?
it influenced him for sure, because every historical context shows that that botched robbery in Virginia influenced him in leaving, and the 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 train robbery was Frank checking out. After that, he was gone. He was nowhere to be seen. He just goes off and lives in Virginia, like there's again. When you look at historical fact, Frank James was wanted as a Civil War criminal, as somebody who joined Luttrell's Raiders. So he was wanted well before Jesse ever was. Again, because Jesse was at home, he wasn't in the Civil War yet. Uh, he didn't join till a little later. Then Frank is still wanted. Then Jesse becomes wanted for murder and somebody. But guess what? Frank was wanted for murder too. So that's what I mean. When you look at the James Gaines story, now a lot of people are going to point to one fact, and I'll point it to it myself. Yes, I get the point that Jesse did a lot of bad things, and a lot probably well worse things of what Frank did, because Frank eventually stopped. Well, it's because Frank didn't become a psychopath, okay? Frank knew when to stop and knew when to stop himself. And I'm not defending Jesse. I'm more pointing to the fact that Frank was the smarter of the two brothers.
Do you think, and this was something I'd begun to feel that maybe the United States government was willing to, if you will, let bygones be bygones, if and basically write off Frank and Jesse's activities as remnants of the Civil War, of carrying that on, provided if they had stopped and went away. I mean, once Jesse's dead, like you said, they kind of give Frank the pardon.
They do.
But maybe they were like, maybe he's like, you know what, like I'm over, I'm done, I'm out. And unlike Pacino, they didn't pull me back in. And I was wondering if maybe that was kind of them going, one thing, okay, you had what was the governor basically of a state plotting, going after one person, which is very unusual. And at the time, he couldn't put bounty money up for him, so that's why he got the railroad. And they may have looked at. I've always felt like somebody looked at the. He's done some bad things. We've done some bad things. Tell you what, you go home and don't do this again, and we'll just act like it didn't happen.
I think, well, here's the issue I have with that.
Okay.
The Civil War was very ugly. Okay, we all know this. Again, there were faults on both sides. The North for really the North and the Pinkertons for burning down homes, because the Pinkertons burned down the Jesse James Ranch. And now they say what they didn't mean to. Yeah, bullshit. I call bullshit on. But from the Civil War standpoint, you had the North bait the South into firing on a fort. You had the South fire the first shot. Again, the South, I'm not painting the South as good. They weren't, but the North weren't innocent either. There were a lot of faults on both sides. Now, because again, a lot of Southern folks lost homes, lost again, they were the South financed. They were the financial support of America at the time prior to the Civil War. So once they lost all that after the war, and then their homes started getting raided by Union soldiers and et cetera, that's sort of where that's the reason for the James Gang and the Latrell, or before that the Latrell Raiders caused the Union soldiers caused a lot of that, and that was after the war. Now, with this, with Jesse being this criminal, had he stopped, would I think they have? I think again, I'd like to say yes, but it's so hard to tell because there was a lot of bad blood. Even after the Civil War, there was still some bad blood between the North and the South. And it's so hard to say yes or no to this, but I'm going to lean toward no. I think if they had, because if they had honestly stopped, now I know Frank stops and he gets pardoned. I think if Jesse had honestly stopped, I don't think they pardon both brothers. I think they're going to kill them both because when they caught and executed a lot of the original James Gang, they sort of figured, oh, I think they thought Frank and Jesse would just quit. Well, one did, the other didn't, and obviously that led to the assassination of Jesse James. And again, did Jesse James deserve the bullet? Yes, he did. But again, my dispute is, so did Frank. I will always maintain, and again, I don't hate Frank James. I didn't know the man, but from every historical contents that I've read and researched, Frank James deserved a bullet too. Getting into it.
He didn't have the banker in Kansas that Jesse did, who started with all the garbage printed about him and giving him, oh, Robin Hood. No.
That's true. Oh god. Yeah, I'm the one. I'll admit it. I'm the asshole who says both brothers needed shot. Anyway.
Two bullets for two brothers.
That's the thing too. I mean, again, I've described it. It was basically like and really once Frank left and Jesse becomes the gang leader, okay, and he's basically Jesse is the leader of the new James Gang. Okay, what slowly starts happening to the new James Gang? Who's pulling the trigger and executing them? Jesse! Jesse James. And why? Because Jesse does not trust members of the gang. That's historical fact. He did not trust them because there was a bounty on his head. There was a point when the governor wanted dead or alive. Originally, the Pinkertons, before the I think it was Missouri that passed that law, if I'm not mistaken, that passed that law where you couldn't raise it no more. Well, before that, it was the Pinkertons who just wanted to arrest him. So now, instead of arresting, yes, you still want it dead or alive, meaning you could still be taken alive. But once a dead or alive poster came with your face on it, you most likely weren't arrested. You were brought in dead. The chances of you being brought in alive, well, it depended on who was doing the bringing. And now, I dare say if it was maybe somebody who was an actual lawman, you might have got brought in alive. But if it's a bounty hunter or somebody who's neat, because let's face this fact, $500, let alone $1,000 or whatever Jesse was worth, cuts a lot of ties.
Yeah, I was never a bounty hunter in the Old West, but when I play one in Red Dead, it's a hell of a lot easier to bring somebody back dead.
This is why I call him Butch the Hitman Rosenbaum.
Don't scare your kids like that.
I'm not scared of my kids. That's the real Jesse James across from me. No,
How
uh,
did you?
I know, I'm dead now. But no, you're right. I think it's a lot easier to bring in someone dead than it is alive. And when Jesse was shot by Robert Ford, yes, he was shot cleaning the paint, a picture, a portrait, whatever, that was dusty. His gun belt was off. And yes, I do believe Jesse got shot. I do believe Jesse's dead. I don't think he was really alive. Um, I'll ask you the same question. Do you think Jesse faked his death, or do you think Robert Ford actually did the deed?
I don't see how he could. I think that was
Mhm.
just people, much like Robert Ford, that had read dime novels and wanted to, and somebody said, "Hey, I can make some money if I tell everybody I'm Jesse James." No, I think he's dead. One thing I was going to bring up in this film, they're they're getting ready to eat, or they have eaten right before Jesse gets shot, and he takes off his guns and he sets them down, and there's a big interesting moment. Now, part of the truth, so that's why he didn't pull out his gun and shoot. But it almost was like, and maybe this is just my interpretation of the film. Jesse knew that they were going to betray him, and he was just kind of like, you know what, I'm tired of running.
That's always been the historical sense too. That Jesse sort of knew his time was up. That he was on borrowed time anyway. Now, do I think that's the case? Yeah, I do. But I also think too, they're again. I don't want to try to beat Jesse James and get inside his head, but I guess that's what we got to do here a bit. That hey, if these guys don't get me, somebody else surely will. Um, so he just said fuck it and got shot in the back of the head, and that was it. Now,
Well, let me ask you this: would you rather be shot by, if you're a wanted criminal, would you rather be shot by a friend or a stranger?
I'd rather be shot by a friend. I'd
I mean,
rather
that's
have.
not a fair, but
No, you're right. Robert Ford and Charlie Ford were trusted by Jesse. Um, even that now there is a scene in the movie where they walk away and they're talking about like killing him, and when he sees, you better never leave my side, freaking, oh my god, great performance by freaking Brad Pitt, but just to show you Jesse's further craziness, but not that you needed to at this point, but still, um, from a historical context, something they don't really tell too much, but it is sort of hinted. But I'll say it here: Jesse James, the real Jesse James, did trust Robert Ford and Charlie Ford, very much so. He was the only two that they did trust in the new gang, and that's why they got brought along. That's something that is historical fact, and you can look it up. Um, so they were trusted, and yes, I agree with you. He knew his time was up. He knew he was on borrowed time. He got shot on Palm Sunday, on Easter Sunday, if you will. But really, really, really good stuff. Just, I enjoyed this movie very much. It's really, again, the only thing I don't love about it is, again, because for me, I've I've been told about the assassination of Jesse James for a long time, and I've seen the assassination of Jesse James more than I've seen the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Okay, um, I would like, and I'm not trying to joke, but that literally it's true. I would like to actually see the full story of Jesse, not just the side half of it. Again, I appreciate this movie for what it is because it does give actual historical context. Thank God. So it's not just some Hollywood piece, though it is a Hollywood piece. But it's a good historical Hollywood piece, and I do highly recommend it. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Butch, what did you think of it?
uh, I want to give it a 4 out of 10.
Okay.
The two biggest negatives, cons for me are, as I said, the pacing. This movie could use a good editor. There's several scenes that could be cut, could be speeded up. I honestly, I feel like there's like an hour of this film that could be cut. And now, I was thinking about you, and I'm like, it's like Favorite Harpin. I've kind of done the longest version of that film I can. I love that. Would go, oh God, here's some more zombies walking around. So I understand that part about being, but also, second biggest con for me is really Casey Affleck as Mortis. He's not interesting. He's very, very slightly pretty damn, and not interesting, but like,
Um, sorry, can you repeat most of what you said? You were cutting off there. Sorry.
I just was saying, Casey Affleck's Bob Ford is just isn't very interesting. And I was reading, that what a great job he did. And I'm like, he's not very, very interesting. And he comes across as like slightly brain damaged, and you don't. And it's not like make him interesting. It's just I didn't care. It's kind of like Titanic, and I remember seeing Titanic, and it's like people were surprised that the ship sunk. It's like, what? Literally, the title of this movie tells you that Jesse James is going to get killed. There's a book called John Dies at the End. Guess what happens at the end of that series? John died. It's just, when how something is going to turn out. The interesting thing is the trip. And for me, this was not an interesting trip. Brad Pitt does a really good job. Jesse is not a very sympathetic character. He's trash. I mean, I don't know what it is. Does he have some good points where he came from?
Yeah.
Everything. It's not horrible. I think that can change.
I'm sorry, you were like cutting in and out there. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
If for anybody that watches this, it's a character study more than it's a Western, and I feel I want to stress that. So if you've never, like me, you haven't seen this film before, it's not like let's hurry up and get to the bank and shoot people and all that. It's character driven, and if I feel kind of wished I'd done that before. I think that may have prepared me for the different film that it is.
Yeah, so that's the one thing we've done here. We've always picked something different. And I picked this film on purpose for two reasons. One, originally, when we were going to do this, we weren't going to do this on the anniversary of Jesse James's death. But things happen. What the hell? We still did it. I will say that you're right. It's a character study. This is historical content character study. Jesse James was one of the biggest psychopathic assholes ever. And I learned that in the fifth grade. And people look, there's this thing called false worship, and this happens a lot with outlaws. And sadly, it has always been associated with Jesse, and I have no fucking idea why. But still to this day, I don't like. People try to explain it to me. I'm like, yeah, that makes no sense. That's not true. Um,
Somebody said something to me about, well, you like the Wild Bunch and these other movies about criminals. Why do you not like this? I'm like, those aren't real.
Right. Right.
William didn't kill anybody in real life that I know of, anyway. He wasn't around robbing trains. Ernest Borgnine wasn't going around. And actually, I guess everything for me ties back to the Wild Bunch. The botched robbery with Jesse reminds me of the botched robbery at the beginning of the Wild Bunch.
Yeah.
So, where your gang gets whittled down and it's all about them falling apart.
Is there anything you want to add about the assassination of Jesse James before we get on out of here?
I think I've covered everything.
It is Butch's turn to pick for next week. What Western are you picking, sir?
Oh, I was going to be mean with you last week, and now I was like, yeah, I won't be. I think I'll be nice to him. I'm going to continue picking the big ones, and if anybody's wondering what I'm looking at, I'm looking here in my DVD case. We're going to do Rio Bravo. John Wayne, Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson.
Dean Martin is really, really good in that movie.
I never thought him. I saw that.
Yeah. The first Western I saw Dean Martin in was The Sons of Katie Elder with John Wayne. I didn't see Rio Bravo till I saw Rio Bravo the same day, but it was later at night because it was coming on after it.
What is it? They go with Jimmy Stewart. I'm looking over here like I can see it. I have it. I can't think of it. We're gonna. That's gonna be one of my picks coming up. Him and Jimmy Stewart are in a film, and the name is escaping me because it's getting late.
But go check out The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And yes, it is a character study because it is about a real life outlaw named Jesse James, who is a historical figure. And for all those who still worship Jesse James, I feel sorry for you. Anyway, Butch, buddy, it is always a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much, buddy. I'll see you next weekend.
Joel, thanks a lot. Appreciate it, bud.
See you. Good night, buddy.